everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is February the 27th, 2025. I'm Barry Stagner. Very glad to have you with us, and I hope you can notice we've had some pretty significant upgrades to our studio here, and very thankful to be moving forward with kind of a new look. And this is all in preparation for what's going to happen now at the end of the month of March, or at least the latter half of the middle portion. Amir Sarfati and I will be starting a new program called The Middle East and Beyond. It will air every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and we'll be covering the events of the Middle East. We'll talk about some of the global things going on as they relate to Bible prophecy, and then on top of that, we're going to be taking your questions for about 20 minutes. So the program will be broken down, the hour program will be broken down into 20 minutes of the Middle East, 20 minutes of the world, and 20 minutes of questions. So we're going to be doing the lineup for a little bit longer. And then when the lineup comes to an end and we start the new program, I'm going to start a program on Thursdays. That's just going to be a real brief program. We're calling it Take 5. And what we're going to do is take 5 minutes or so, and heavy on the or so, and deal with some of the big questions that come regarding the Bible. We're going to talk about I get this question all the time. I think I mentioned it last week, about prophets in the New Testament age. And, the Ephesians talks about giving us apostles and prophets. And yet there is a transition regarding the office of prophet. As Jesus said in Matthew, John the Baptist was the last of the prophets. So we'll talk about what that means. One of the other things, I want to discuss in one of our early programs is the issue in Matthew 7 about judge not lest you be judged. And there's a lot of misinformation and misrepresentation about that. And some will go as far to say, if you don't forgive everybody, you're going to hell and you can't be saved. And we'll clean that up too. So, and I would encourage you, submit your questions over these next few weeks. The big Bible questions, and we want to take some time and answer those things. So submit your questions on the lineup and I'll comb through them and take a look at those and try to gather some to begin the program once we start in the beginning of April. So with that said, that's our information portion of this evening's program. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And we've got some heavy stuff to talk about this week, as always. But moving off to the Middle East and the nation of Israel, the Times of Israel reported that over 600 Palestinian prisoners, including terrorists, were freed in exchange for 4 slain hostages. Israel began releasing Palestinian security prisoners on Wednesday night as Hamas handed over the remains of what is said were 4 slain hostages, marking the way to the final swap of the ceasefires deal's first phase. By early morning, over 600 Palestinians have been released, including over 100 murderers and life-termers, and 445 Gazans detained since October 7th, and among those freed and deported via Egypt were numerous senior Hamas terrorists. The prisoners went free after a days-long delay following Israel's announcement that it would postpone their release until Hamas guaranteed an end to the staged propaganda ceremonies accompanying the release of hostages, and until, unlike previous exchanges that saw prisoners freed only after hostages reached Israeli soil, buses began transporting the detainees around 1 a.m., shortly after the 4 bodies were transferred in Gaza to the Red Cross. And soon after, 37 prisoners reached Ramallah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office announced that the Red Cross had transferred the bodies of 4 Israelis to the IDF and brought them to the Karim Shalom crossing for initial forensic testing. Another 5 prisoners from East Jerusalem were escorted by Israeli police from the Russian compound detention center to their homes in the city. And ahead of the swap, Israeli security forces in the West Bank attempted to suppress celebrations surrounding the release near Ofer prison, where 151 security prisoners were expected to go free. And the article goes on and talks about how many were released and where, including one particular prisoner who'd been in Israeli custody for 44 years, since 1978, the killing of a 27-year-old Israeli bus driver, Mordecai Yakul in his vehicle near Ramallah. He was once released in exchange for a Gilad Shalit, the prisoner exchange, and he was arrested 3 years later on terrorism charges. Big surprise. And again, this just underscores the distinction and value of life between the two groups, between the Israelis and that of the Palestinians who, get released from prison. Instead of being thankful, they go right back to what they were doing before because they have a indoctrinated hatred of the Jews, and their only desire is to see them eliminated and wiped off the face of the earth. And again, that's not just, Hamas, that's the Palestinians. And of course, there are Palestinians there's Christian Palestinians, there's those who love the Lord. But, I think one of the things we have to remember, and we're going to talk more about this at the end of the program, is that when you have the Holy Spirit and you recognize the King of the Jews is your Savior, you're going to have a love for the Jews. That doesn't mean you agree with every political decision made or every governmental move or even every military decision. But one thing that the Holy Spirit will never teach you is that Israel has no right to the land or right to exist within God's covenanted territory that he gave them. Now, the Jewish News Syndicate reports that pay for slay to continue even if we only have 1 penny left, Mahmoud Abbas has vowed. The Palestinian Authority will not deduct a single penny from its pay for slay fund that rewards terrorists and their families for their attacks. According to PA Chief Mahmoud Abbas, telling members of his ruling Fatah faction last week, according to the translated remarks Palestinian Media Watch published on Thursday, we again emphasize that we are proud of the sacrifices made by the martyrs, prisoners, and wounded, a PA leader said at the Feb 21 gathering of the Revolutionary Council, Fatah's second highest body, which is chaired by Abbas in Ramallah, Samaria. I told you once, and I stand by my word, even if we have only 1 penny left, it's for the prisoners and the martyrs, he continued, echoing previous remarks he made on July 23rd, 2018 in an address to the city. The PA will not agree to reduce any obligation, any interest, or any penny given to them, Abbas said. He concluded they must receive everything as in the past. And listen to this. And they are more precious than all of us. Those who take Israeli lives are the most precious among the Palestinian people, according to Mahmoud Abbas. In a statement issued following its annual gathering last week, the Revolutionary Council reiterated Fatah's commitment to supporting the families of martyrs, prisoners, and injured individuals, emphasizing that they are the heroes of freedom who deserve top priority in terms of protection and care, the PA's official Wafa news agency reported. The Palestinian faction was preparing to integrate terrorists released under the current hostage deal with Gaza-based Hamas into the movement and national frameworks, the announcement noted. And according to Wafa, the Revolutionary Council vowed to double its efforts to support prisoners, mercy for the martyrs, freedom for the prisoners, and healing for the wounded, the statement concluded. Now, again, I think one of the things is kind of a tell-all regarding the true mindset of both Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, and then certainly that of Hamas, when we have learned now through the forensic investigations of the Beavis family that was returned, that these little boys were killed with the bare hands of their captains. And I'm sure, and Terry and I, my wife, have talked about just this sheer brutality, this demonic brutality. And the likelihood is that they did this in front of their mother in order to make her experience as horrid as possible before they killed her. This past week or yesterday, they were buried in the same casket, so they would forever be together. You just can't explain that kind of evil. It's nothing short of demonic. There's no other way to understand it, and that's exactly what it is. And, again, what we're going to talk about in the end is the importance of recognizing Israel's place in the plan of God. And there's no other position for us to take as born-again, Bible-believing Christians. This is not just some political entity that exists in the last days. The presence of Israel in the land, unconditionally, eternally covenanted to them, is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and it goes on. And, there's so many things. I find it beyond ridiculous that so many people question modern Israel as being biblical Israel. Well, if modern Israel is biblical Israel, then Ezekiel 38 and 39 is never going to happen because it deals with the nation of Israel. Or you're going to have to allegorize it or apply some type of figurative meaning to it because there's nothing in history that even parallels it. The same is true with the return of Jesus. What's he coming back to the Mount of Olives for? If this is Palestine and not Israel, and why in the world would the city we're going to dwell in forever be called the New Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Israeli people, the city of God, so to speak? So, again, just some of these things are just beyond understanding, and the vileness and the wickedness can only be attributed to the demon realm having its way within this particular group and others. Now, the Times of Israel has reported that the IDF had hit multiple sites in Syria and Lebanon as Israel vows to maintain security. Airstrikes targeted sites near Damascus and Syria, deep inside Lebanon late Tuesday, the IDF said in a statement. In Syria, the strikes hit military storage sites that presented a threat, while the Lebanese bombing targeted Hezbollah operatives who were violating the terms of a ceasefire, the military said. Syrian and Lebanese sources reported that a number of people were killed in the attacks, and the presence of military assets and forces in the southern part of Syria constitutes a threat to the citizens of the State of Israel, the Israeli military said. The IDF will continue to act to remove any threat to the citizens of the State of Israel. Defense Minister Israel Katz also confirmed that Israel was carrying out airstrikes in southern Syria after blasts were reported in several areas south of Damascus. The Air Force is attacking strongly in southern Syria as a part of the new policy we have defined of pacifying southern Syria, and the message is clear. We will not allow Syria to become southern Lebanon, a spokesperson said in a statement referring to the volatile situations in Lebanon, where the Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah has repeatedly provoked conflicts, most recently a war last year. We will not endanger the security of our citizens, Katz went on to say. Israeli planes had multiple strikes in the region, and one of the interesting things that has developed from this is that there were demonstrators marching in Damascus after the strikes, calling on the new Syrian government to bomb Tel Aviv in response to the attacks. Now, these marches were taking place in Damascus. And this is interesting because we do have to remember that the new governmental regime in Syria is rooted in Al-Qaeda. And we all know, the history of that particular group. And the interesting part about this, again, is this march in Damascus and these protests in Damascus are calling upon this government to target Tel Aviv, major city, obviously, in Israel, and the potential response to any such effort could be the destruction of Damascus. Now, I've said it many times on this program. We'll probably repeat it in the future. Amir and I talk about it all the time. We just covered the same thing on the Q&A last Monday when the question was posed about the sequence of events that will take place as far as what's next. And I believe, and Amir and I have talked many times, and he agrees as well, and I with him, that it's probably the next thing on the calendar is probably the destruction of Damascus as it relates to Bible prophecy. And this is very likely the catalyst for the Ezekiel invasion and kind of an enough is enough attitude towards the nation of Israel by the group named in Ezekiel 38 39, which, by the way, includes Russia, Iran, Turkey, Sudan, and Libya. Now, the interesting part about that is you have to recognize that if you take Turkey, Iran, Libya, and Sudan, you have the vast majority of radical Islamic extremist factions and reactions. And these are the groups that want to see the end of Israel as, Tayyip Erdogan has made no bones about the fact that Israel has to come to an end and wants to see their destruction as they move toward a more extremist position. Egypt. Goodness, pardon me. Need to slow down. Russia is kind of the odd man out. And that's why the economic element in the Ezekiel invasion seems to be the motivating factor for the protests of Sheba and Dedan, which is Saudi Arabia and the Arab Gulf states. But so many things are just falling into place, and things are continuing to ramp up. And we've seen this coalition now develop, and there's lots of stories regarding the relationship. Russia wants to build a port on the Sudanese coast, on the Red Sea, and give them closer access to having hardware in the region, striking distance, really, of Israel. And, we have to remember that, these particular groups, Libya and North Africa and Sudan, are both participants in this, but we don't know to what degree. It could be that Turkey leads the charge, which I've said many, many times. I believe that's quite possible, simply because most of the nations named in the Ezekiel 38-39 war scenario are related to the geographic area of modern Turkey. And, certainly Russia, or Rosh, would possibly represent the nation of Russia. Interesting that the King James actually translates Rosh as a noun and not a proper name, and sees it as it's kind of curious that you have 579 usage of the word Rosh in the Old Testament. And only one time in Genesis 46 is it translated as a proper name, as a son, or I think it's a grandson of Benjamin. But also all the other 578 times it's translated as head, chief, capital meaning the top of a column, the decorative top of a column. And so, noun is the more common usage of the word Rosh. But, again, great minds have seen the necessity for Russian involvement. So, that would mean there's 5 players there, 4 of them being extremist Islamic nations. So, if that is the case, then we do know that God himself, according to Ezekiel 39, is going to wipe out radical Islam. And thus that would potentially lead to the opportunity for the Antichrist to come in with a plan, resolve the Middle East crisis and greater problems that the rapture combined with the Ezekiel war scenario is going to create for the world, and say, hey, let's let them build their third temple, the place that he's going to desecrate. And it's kind of interesting that, it's been said, I've heard some Jewish believers mention that the third temple is the only unsanctioned temple as it relates to Bible prophecy. It's just simply implied. It's never stated there's going to be one, but it's implied by the fact that the Antichrist is going to go into the most holy place. So there has to be a most holy place. The most holy place is going to be in the temple. And we do know that the temple, in some way, shape, or form, is going to be destroyed, because there's a very descriptive set of chapters at the end of Ezekiel that are talk about the reign of Christ and the millennial reign. Isaiah 61 to 66 talks about the same type of thing. So we do know that what potentially seems like the destruction of Damascus will be followed by the onset of the Ezekiel war. Very possibly sometime before the end of the Ezekiel war could be the rapture of the church, and then the end of the Ezekiel war by the wrath of God, and then the rise of the Antichrist to power. So, if we're seeing all these things come together right now in the way that they are, that ought to remind us we need to keep our eyes lifted up and not get too consumed by the moment or the things going on around us. So, Lord, of course, that doesn't mean we stick our head in the sand either, nor do we move to the mountains and buy guns and water or ammo and water. If we need to be engaged, we're here for a reason to tell people about Jesus so that they might miss what's coming upon the whole world. But most importantly, that they would miss the lake of fire, live in the New Jerusalem with you and I. Now, Reuters reports that Iran's enriched uranium stock has jumped significantly since December. And actually, the Wall Street Journal ran an article that said Iran now has enough enriched uranium for 6 nuclear warheads. Now, Iran's stock of uranium close to weapons grade has jumped since it announced a dramatic acceleration in enrichment in December, and there's been no progress on resolving outstanding issues, 2 reports by the UN nuclear watchdog said on Wednesday. The stock of uranium enriched up to 60% fissile purity, close to the roughly 90% of bomb grade. And remember, we talked about this a month or so ago, that to get from 60 to 90% takes a minuscule amount of time in comparison to get from the starting point, we'll talk about that in a moment, to 60%. 60% is where all the work comes in. Getting up to 60% is where all the work comes in. Getting up to 90, and that's why they hit the pause button, because it takes no time at all for it to be enriched all the way. Again, the Wall Street Journal article says there is 90% enriched uranium already at hand, enough for 6 nuclear warheads. Now, Iran again said its uranium enrichment is for nuclear energy and peaceful purposes only. Well, again, if you're going to use it for energy, you don't have to enrich it beyond 4 to 5%. And why would you take it all the way up to 60%, which is very costly? Why would you need to have that level of enriched uranium if all you're going to do is keep the lights on? So again, the lies continue to come out of the Iranian regime. And President Donald Trump's administration has said it plans to pressure Iran over its nuclear program. The IAEA has said time is running out for diplomacy to impose new restrictions on Iran's activities. The time ran out a long time ago. I don't know what they're talking about. The significantly increased production of and accumulation of high enriched uranium by Iran, the only non-nuclear weapon state to produce such nuclear material, is of serious concern, the IAEA said, in a passage that unusually was included in both of its quarterly reports on Iran. These confidential reports sent to member states on Wednesday, and both seen by Reuters, showed that while the stock of 60% material grew by half, there was no real progress in resolving long-running outstanding issues, including the unexplained presence of uranium traces at undeclared sites. The stock of uranium refined up to 60% in the form of uranium hexafluoride grew by 92.5 kilograms, 204 pounds, in the past quarter to 274.8 kilograms, or 606 pounds, one of the 2 confidential IAEA reports said. Now, I want to show you a picture of this whole enrichment issue. Now, I know probably most of you have not ever seen a centrifuge, and many of you have seen a picture or two, but I think it's important to see why this is important for us to know regarding the enrichment process. I mean, it's no small task to do what they're doing, and here's an actual enrichment facility, and you can see these centrifuges lined up, and these facilities are actually massive warehouses, and there's thousands and thousands of these centrifuges that are enriching uranium. And just let me remind you of the whole process, because, again, to make the argument that this is, for energy, peaceful energy purposes only, the enrichment material for uranium, obviously, uranium contains 2 isotopes, U-238, which is more than 99% of the isotopes in uranium, natural uranium, is U-238. The fissile material, that which you can split the atoms and cause the explosive reaction, is U-235, and it's less than 1% of natural uranium. So what these centrifuges do is they spin the isotopes, and the heavier U-238 moves to the outside, and the lighter U-235 stays in the middle, and they vacuum it out of the middle. And that's why you saw, kind of the daisy chain look. These rods at the top are feeding from one to the next. And that takes the heavier concentration of U-235, even though it's very, very minuscule, the amount of concentration that's increased per process. and then they move it into the next centrifuge. And again, the process repeats itself. The centrifuge spins the two isotopes. The heavier 238 goes to the outside. The U-235 stays in the middle, and then it is vacuumed out, goes to the next one. Process continues until there's a heavier concentration of U-235 than the U-238. And this is what creates the uranium that's enriched to the degree where you can create a nuclear weapon. And again, if you see these centrifuges and the number of them and understand the cost associated with them, and, to take it to a place where, you're going to enrich it and have these huge facilities stacked with these costly centrifuges, your intentions have nothing to do with creating energy. You wouldn't spend that kind of money to enrich up to 60%, to say nothing of 90%. Now, where before its latest acceleration, Iran was producing between 6 and 9 kilograms, 13 and 20 pounds of uranium, enriched up to 60% per month. Now that figure is up between 35 and 40, or 77 and 88 pounds per month, the senior diplomat said. This is just short of the 42 kilograms that's enough in principle for one bomb. So they are continuing their process. And again, there are so many potential motivations to ignite the Ezekiel war scenario, and it could be taking out Iran's nuclear facilities. And, there's seems to be a footprint of enriched uranium in undisclosed locations, as the article said, reported by the IAEA. And it could very well be, as they have done in time past, that Israel is going to take out these nuclear facilities, or at least attempt to, and maybe that, combined with the Ezekiel or the Isaiah 17:1 fulfillment, all this put together causes these groups to finally work up the courage to attack Israel, which is a decision that they will regret for all of eternity. Now, moving on and out of the Middle East, Georgia Star News reports that Trump has made a move to prevent an AI-powered digital Pearl Harbor happening from China. President Trump, in a February 21st proclamation entitled America First Investment Policy, that seeks to assert American dominance, particularly in advanced technology sectors, including AI, by incentivizing investment in the U.S., restricting it from the People's Republic of China. The article will say PRC from here on out, by restricting investment by China and other foreign adversaries in the U.S. And stating the policy in a very straightforward manner, the goal is clearly to keep and move the most advanced AI research and development in the U.S. It is the policy of the United States to preserve an open investment environment to help ensure that artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies of the future are built, created, and grown right here in the U.S. That includes the chips used for AI, including those made by NVIDIA, which mostly made in Taiwan at the moment. Considering the goal outlined in the president's policy is to keep the technology away from China, and Taiwan appears to be a rather precarious geographic location for the world's foremost and dangerous technologies, creating high potentials for espionage, and or military capture at some point in the not-too-distant future. It clearly poses a national security risk if the U.S. lacks its own developed supply chain. Toward that end, the Trump investment proclamation takes several steps to expedite the development of high technologies in the U.S., including by incentivizing investment here from allies and discouraging it elsewhere. For example, the environmental reviews for all facilities will be sped up, expedite environmental reviews for any investment over $1 billion in the United States. There'll be major capital controls imposed on technology investment, again, rewarding U.S. investment and punishing investment in adversary countries. The United States will establish new rules to stop U.S. companies and investors from investing in industries that advance the PRC's National Military Civil Fusion strategy and stop PRC affiliated persons from buying up critical American businesses and assets, allowing only those investments that serve American interests. Now, again, it's kind of interesting. This question comes up pretty regularly. Where's China in Bible prophecy? Well, China is unmentioned in Bible prophecy. And again, why would this a huge group of people, 1.4 billion, I think is the number, they're up there with India. And why would this group and this particular region of the world and this influence and ideology be unmentioned in Scripture? Well, it might be kind of an odd thing to consider, but the population of the church, the underground church in China, is about 2/3 of that of the whole United States. So, you have this mass disappearance of people. And, I think one of the things that, and again, this is just speculation, so don't hold me to this, and you don't need to email me about it. Not that I mind getting your emails, but listen, if you think about what's going to happen after the rapture, there's going to be unpaid mortgages, unpaid car payments, unpaid bills, loans, all that kind of stuff. And by this mass disappearance of people, it's going to be catastrophic to the economy. So, when you have 20 some odd million Christians in China that disappear, even though their overall population is some 1.4 billion, it's still going to be catastrophic to their economy. So they could be subject to the same economic collapse that the rapture would bring to the United States of America. And, we also have to remember that the whole geopolitical landscape after the rapture is going to change. There's going to be a group who side with the Antichrist, and there is cronies, and they're mentioned in both Daniel and Revelation. They're 10 in number, and they have not, according to Revelation 17, have not received the kingdom as of yet. So what we're told basically is that there is going to be a dividing of the world by the Antichrist with those who are going to rule under him. So possibly that's why China is not mentioned in the last days scenario. This huge nation, massive numbers of people, all the other things we know about them and their military might and all that. And, let me just say this, because my cough is clearing up, by the way, and I'm very thankful that things are finally kind of wrapping up. So thanks for all who've been praying, and even got some counsel. Have you tried this? And I've been trying a few different things and seem to be finally landing something that's trying up. This is an allergy-related thing, by the way. And but we watch all these things take place, and we ponder some and speculate on others. But I think what we have to remember, I think first and foremost, is that we're told that the day of the Lord is not going to come upon us like a thief in the night, because we're not of the night, we're of the day, and we've been given ample information to know that we are late in the scheme of things as far as the prophetic scenario goes, and the end of the church age, and then the ensuing 70th week of Daniel. I think that's another reason that it's so foolish to say that modern Israel is a biblical Israel, because if modern Israel is a biblical Israel, then Daniel chapter 9 is in error, and there were not 70 weeks determined for Daniel's people in the holy city. There were only 69, and those have all been fulfilled. And with the arrival of Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, fulfilling the Zechariah 9:9 prophecy. But, if modern Israel is a biblical Israel, there are so many holes in the Bible about so many different issues, including the 70 weeks determined for Daniel's people in the holy city. So, let's just remember, we are privileged to have this information. And also, I say this in pretty much every conference I'm privileged to speak at. Why would God want us in the book of Revelation to know so much about a time with which we have no appointment? Why would he tell the church all the things that he has told in Revelation 6-19 about what's going to come upon the whole world? Why do we need to know about the seals being opened, the trumpets blown, the bowls poured out? Well, I believe in part that's so we would have a burden for those around us who are going to face all these things, and men's heart failing them from fear because of the things that are coming upon the earth. We need to be telling people about the Lord. Things are moving rapidly forward. And, this article, mentioning AI and not wanting to have another an AI Pearl Harbor type of event. reminds us that AI is seemingly going to play a role in the tribulation period. And it's developed to the point now where, can't really tell, or a lot of people can't tell, if something is an artificially intelligent created image or if it's a real person. I mean, the technology has gotten that advanced, and this lends itself to the creation of an image of the beast that has life breathed into it, apparently, and looks real, and people are going to worship after it because it's a pseudo resurrection mimicking that of Christ. Now, the hour is late, and we are, I believe, soon going home. So let's get passionate about telling people about the Lord. And as I said, I believe he is coming for us very, very soon. Now, the Federalist says, and this kind of plays into what Paul talked about in 2 Timothy chapter 3, with perilous times coming upon the world, and there being headstrong, haughty, haters of God, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, and all these things. And we see, things happening and with this Doge deal going on, where the government efficiency that's, Elon Musk has been in the news all the time about some of the decisions that he's been allowed to make regarding cutting funding to wasteful spending. And the Federalist says that the USAID blew hundreds of thousands in taxpayer slush funds on Ukrainian pickle maker and pet accessories. Now listen to this article. The U.S. Agency for International Development, that's USAID, spent millions of American taxpayer dollars propping up pet projects like dog collar manufacturing and pickle making in Ukraine, and then spent months stonewalling members of Congress about that spending, according to findings obtained by the Federalists. Senator Joni Ernst's staff uncovered the secret slush funds when, after months of enduring the agency's excuses to justify its resistance to oversight, they were finally permitted to access very limited amounts of data. In October 2024, as Ernst has since detailed, the senator's staff visited USAID headquarters in person for an in-camera review of Ukraine assistance data, even though her team discovered the documents were not classified. Even though they were heavily restricted during their investigation, Ernst's team discovered a variety of U.S. taxpayer-funded grants funneled to Ukrainian businesses under the guise of both Competitive Economy Program and Investment for Business Resilience Funds. Among the grants Ernst's staff discovered were hundreds of thousands of dollars devoted to literal pet projects, including approximately $300,000 to a pet tracking app, approximately $300,000 to a dog collar manufacturer, and approximately another $109,000 to a pet food packaging producer, according to the findings breakdown in Ernst's office. Fashionistas also benefited from taxpayer-funded expenditures with a women's clothing company, a fashion photographer, a purveyor of contemporary knitwear, a luxury bridal brand, a marketplace for designer artisanal pieces, and even a trade mission for a fashion design house, raking in a combined $33,000, almost $750,000. Now, designers, including a custom carpet manufacturer, received approximately $2 million. Two different furniture lines received $114,000 and $91,000, respectively, also joined in the funding frenzy. Even foodies received their fill of American cash. A trade mission for condiment manufacturer cost American taxpayers $94,000. A pickle maker received $148,000. An organic coffee and tea producer was handed $255,000. A vineyard netted $89,000, and an artisanal fruit tea company collected $104,000 of your money and mine. I find it so, curious that so many are against spending our money wisely and, calling for, and Tesla has been impacted by this greatly, and sales are down, and protests, and Musk's name is being thrown to the lions and drugged to the mud, and any other euphemism you want to use. But the reality is they're wasting our money and have been wasting our money on foolish things. I mean, we've seen, the thousands and millions of dollars thrown at things like transsexual activities in the animal kingdom. And research like this, it's just insane how they have thrown our money around. Now, here's the deal, and here's part of why this is so important. They're borrowing that money to give to other countries for stupid things like we just talked about. And how foolish is that? And so again, looking back at what Paul said in 2 Timothy 3, these perilous times are because of headstrong and haughty people who think they ought to be able to do whatever it is that they want with your money and mine. Now, our next story is a bit of a tragedy, I think, and hope for all of us to see it that way, because it really is very telling about why our country's in the condition that it's in. It comes from National Public Radio, and the headline reads, Christianity declines among U.S. adults, while religiously unaffiliated grows, the study says. Now, this has been going on for quite some time. We've probably reported this story in the last however many years it is that I've been doing prophecy updates. It's probably the fourth or fifth time that this has been reported in this same fashion, that the number of those who would check a box on a form regarding religious affiliation as none is increasing and increasing and continuing to. The article says a portion of the U.S. population identifying as Christian has declined significantly over the last 2 decades. But a massive new Pew Research study finds that trend may be leveling off. And the study, which surveyed 37,000 Americans, found that 62% identify as Christian. By comparison, the Pew did a similar study in 2007. The percentage was 78%. Most of that decline occurred until 5 years ago when it began to level off, according to the Pew study. The current Christian breakdown in the U.S. is that 40% identify as Protestant, 19% identify as Catholic, and that the remaining 3% say they are Christian without specifying any additional denomination. All 3 major branches of Protestantism have declined in share of the population since 2007. Evangelicals make up 23%, down from 26%. In 2007, mainline Protestants account for 11%, down from 18% in 2007. People who attend historically Black Protestant churches make up 5%, down from 7% in 2007. And again, the survey was based on 37,000 U.S. adults. People also found that nearly 3 in 10 identify as religiously unaffiliated, which can mean atheist, agnostic, or no religion in particular. Younger adults who were raised in only nominally religious homes or outside of religion altogether are more likely to be unaffiliated than older adults. You have more and more people who have no religion having children, says Greg Smith, Senior Associate Director of the Religion Research at Pew. So you have more and more people who, as children, were raised with no religion, and many of them grow up to not be particularly religious themselves. Some people who are now unaffiliated left Christianity specifically. Pew found that religion is less sticky than it once was from generation to generation, even among people raised in a specific faith. Meanwhile, those from non-religious upbringings tend to remain non-religious as adults. Now, we've got another story that's kind of related to the same type of idea as far as religious activity in a person's home. And, I think that watching what we're seeing happen with our young people in particular, the ideas that they have, and then, seeing young people on college campuses say, we are Hamas, and the other ridiculous things, and then seeing these interviews with different people playing a man on the street kind of role, when they're talking with someone and asking them, so do you chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free? And the respondent says, oh, yeah, absolutely, we believe that. And then they say, what river is that? What sea is that? And they can't answer the question. They're just being moved by the populace around them and what people are thinking and what their peers are saying. So they have no compass whatsoever, morally or spiritually. This is tragic to see the decline, especially of evangelical Christianity, and just that lack of influence is now manifesting itself in the homes of American citizenry. And all I can say to them is, "Come, Lord Jesus, come." Now, our last story comes from Haaretz, and the headline reads, "Jews less likely to believe in God than any religious group in America," a new survey shows. Did you catch that? The chosen people of God are less likely to believe in God than any religious group in America. And according to the latest religious landscape study, conducted again by Pew Research, Jews are more likely to be intermarried and to support abortion and gay rights than most other Americans. After Hindus, they earn more money than members of any other religious group. And I'm sorry, that was just a little side note. The last article is Israel 365 News, and it's an op-ed piece. It says, "Are Christian Zionists more Jewish than liberal anti-Israel Jews?" And the author says, "I occasionally write op-eds in response to opinions I disagree with, but this is the first time I've written one because I so strongly agree with an opinion that I could not remain silent." And the article was based on the readings from a friend that said, "Who is considered a Jew after October 7th?" And the explanation given about the headline in the article that follows is because before World War II, being a Jew was stigmatized, and no one would admit to being a Jew unless he were really a Jew. Conversion into Judaism was unheard of, dangerous, and illegal in most countries. Anyone who claimed to be a Jew was taken at his word. We had truly become, as Balaam predicted, the nation that dwells alone and not reckoned among the nations. But as Israel modernized and became a wonderful place to live, the Israeli government was suddenly faced with the dilemma of determining who could come and live in the ancestral homeland. At first, the law of return gave Jews the right to relocate to Israel and acquire Israeli citizenship, and the definition of a Jew was based on the Nazi definition, applying to people with one or more Jewish grandparents and their spouses. Halakha, or the Jewish law, was even more straightforward, based on the binary principle, and anyone with a Jewish mother was Jewish. No definition of a Jew is considered any beliefs or actions. Who is a Jew is considered any beliefs or action. They were people bound by blood. And after much debate about the definition of who a Jew is, the Knesset amended the law of return in 1970 to exclude people who have voluntarily changed their religion. And the rabbi who wrote the article that moved the author of this article raised a point quietly discussed behind closed doors by the most ardent Zionists, and that is, there is no question that a person with a Jewish mother can eat pork on Yom Kippur, and he is still a Jew. A Jew can take on new and foreign faith, but the moment he turns his heart to the God of Israel, he's immediately accepted back as a wayward brother, once a Jew, always a Jew. But connecting with Christian Zionists has brought this into question. I feel more at home. Listen to what this Jewish author says. "I feel more at home sitting with Christians who love Israel than with liberal Jews who reject Israel and support political agendas that threaten the promised land. My Christian friends share many of my dearest values, share my Bible, and share my love for the most precious thing in my life outside of my family, and that is the land of Israel." And the article goes on. It's rather lengthy, just to talk about how this has impacted this gentleman and what stirred him up to write this op-ed piece, which was a bit, as he said at the outset, a bit outside the norm of his normal writings. But, what I wanted to talk to you about in conclusion, and what we were mentioning or pointing to at least earlier, is that we have to remember what happens after the tribulation. And after the tribulation, the sheep and the goats are divided. And the sheep are invited to come into the rest of the Lord, and because of what they did to the Lord's brethren. Now remember, Jesus was a Jew. He's the king of the Jews yet to this day. He is the Holy One of Israel, and simultaneously he is the head of the church. So the sheep and the goats after the tribulation are divided based on how they treated the Jews during the tribulation. And those who, did nothing for the brethren of the Lord are cast into the place where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So your position on Israel matters. It doesn't save you, but I think what the important thing is to recognize is that if you are saved, you are going to recognize that the Jews are still God's chosen people, and he is not done with them. He's still going to save a third of them, and they will still look upon the one whom they pierced and mourn as one mourns for an only son at the second coming of Christ, according to Zechariah 12:10. So I just really strongly want to encourage you to make sure that your positions are biblical and not political, and that they are sound based on what the Bible says and not public opinion. Because, God loves the Jews. He loves the nation of Israel. And, I think that our greatest takeaway from the nation of Israel, and in spite of their national rejection of the Messiah, of Jesus of Nazareth, he's still saving individual Jews to this very day. So that's the true love of God. And I think we need to understand that in these last days. He still loves national Israel. He still has a plan for them, in spite of all that they have done. He said in Jeremiah 31, the seas quit obeying their boundaries, ordained at creation. If the sun and moon do not take their place in the skies of night and day, then you will know that I have cast off Israel for all the things that they've done. Well, if the sun's out where you're at, or the moon in the night sky, or the stars of heaven are out there shining away, and if the oceans are maintaining their boundaries where you live, then you can know for sure God has not cast off the nation of Israel for the things that they have done. And our takeaway needs to be our God is merciful and gracious, and he is beyond kind, and he is still unwilling that any should perish, but that all would come to repentance, a change of mind and life. And so let's just be thankful that we have such an example of the nation of Israel, about the mercies and the care and the love of God, and apply that to our own lives. Well, again, that's it for this week. And just encourage you, be praying for these two new efforts, the Middle East and beyond with Amir and I, and then Take 5, as we dissect some of the things that are some of the hard questions. And please make sure that you submit your questions. And, just FYI, if you have a question, wait until this program is archived, because when it's live, as soon as it is archived, all of the comments disappear, and I can't see any of them. So if you have a question, you can go in after the fact and just make a comment, and I'll go through those questions and start accumulating things so we can address deeper into, early in the month of April. So, well, with that said, that's it for this week, and thank you again so much for joining us. And it's funny, as I mentioned the end of the lineup and the start of the new program, I had multiple people ask me if, are we going to get to see Louis? Yeah, I'm going to bring him on so you can see that big tank. He was at the vet the other day, and 75.2 pounds. And I know that's not like a mastiff or anything, but, when you've got a 75-pound dog that thinks he's your baby and wants to sit in your lap and lay on your head while you're sleeping, 75 pounds is a lot of weight. But we love him to death, and I'll get him on camera so y'all can have a look at him who are interested. Well, again, that's it for this week. So, as always, I'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless you.